Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the person you see in the mirror is not your enemy, not your limitation, but your greatest unfinished project. Not broken, not lost, just unfinished. That moment of realization can be uncomfortable, even painful, because it forces you to face a simple truth: your current situation is not your final destination. We live in a world where people wait for change as if it will arrive like a gift. We wait for motivation. We wait for the perfect time. We wait for someone to rescue us with an opportunity. But what if the real turning point in your life doesn't come from outside at all? What if it comes from a decision made quietly within you? A decision to stop running from who you are and start building who you could become. Rebuilding yourself doesn't start with applause. It doesn't start with approval. It starts in silence. It starts when you decide that your past will not trap you, your failures will not define you, and your fears will no longer control you. Because the most powerful transformation in your life will never happen around you. It will always happen within you. Taking personal responsibility is the foundation of real change because it shifts power back into your own hands instead of leaving it scattered across circumstances, people, or luck. When you accept responsibility, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and start seeing yourself as an active participant in shaping it. This single mental shift changes the way you think, feel, and act. Without responsibility, growth is accidental. With responsibility, growth becomes intentional. When people refuse responsibility, they often live in a state of quiet frustration. They believe their problems are caused by their boss, their past, their family, the economy, or bad timing. While some of these factors may truly be difficult, blaming them doesn't improve the situation. It actually weakens the individual because it trains the mind to look outward for explanations instead of inward for solutions. The moment you take responsibility, you say, I may not control everything, but I control my response, my effort, and my attitude. That mindset alone separates people who grow from people who stay stuck. Personal responsibility begins with honesty. It requires you to look at your current situation and admit where you contributed to it, even when that truth feels uncomfortable. Maybe you didn't prepare enough. Maybe you ignored warning signs. Maybe you stayed in your comfort zone too long. This level of self-awareness isn't about self-criticism. It's about self-ownership. You are not shaming yourself. You are empowering yourself by recognizing that your actions, habits, and decisions matter. When you own your role, you give yourself the authority to change the outcome. This foundation of responsibility also builds mental strength. When you know that your life is largely shaped by your choices, you naturally become more careful, more thoughtful, and more disciplined. You stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. You think before you speak. You plan before you act. You reflect before you repeat mistakes. This isn't about being perfect, but about being conscious. Responsibility forces you to think long-term instead of only reacting to short-term discomforts. It also creates integrity, which is one of the most valuable personal assets anyone can have. When you take responsibility, your words and actions start to align. You don't make excuses for missed commitments. You don't shift blame when results aren't good. You own your promises. You own your failures. This builds trust with others, and more importantly, it builds trust with yourself. When you trust yourself, your confidence becomes real, not based on pretending or posturing, but on proven self-respect. Another powerful aspect of taking responsibility is that it increases your problem-solving ability. If everything is someone else's fault, you will wait for someone else to fix it. But if it's your responsibility, your mind automatically starts looking for solutions. You ask better questions. You look for patterns. You seek knowledge. You take action. This problem-solving mindset compounds over time. You become more resourceful, more adaptable, and more capable. Life stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something you work with. Responsibility also matures your emotional intelligence. Instead of reacting with anger, denial, or defensiveness, you begin to approach situations with calmness and clarity. You learn to say, I could have handled that better, without feeling weak. In fact, you feel stronger because you are no longer controlled by ego. Your pride is replaced with progress. Your excuses are replaced with effort. Your justifications are replaced with lessons. Over time, personal responsibility reshapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to survive and start seeing yourself as someone building a life. Your self-talk changes. Your standards rise. Your expectations shift from, what can I get away with, to, what kind of person do I want to become? That internal upgrade is where real transformation happens. Responsibility is not about carrying blame for everything that goes wrong. It's about carrying ownership for what you can influence. It's understanding that you may not control the starting point, but you absolutely control the direction. And once you grasp that, you're no longer waiting to be saved. You're building yourself, day by day, choice by choice. Failure as feedback is a powerful mindset because it changes the emotional meaning of mistakes. Most people are taught to fear failure, to feel embarrassed by it, and to avoid it at all costs. When you see failure as a final verdict, it becomes a wall that stops progress. But when you see it as feedback, it becomes a guide that shows you where to adjust. It is no longer a judgment of your worth. It becomes information about your process, your strategy, and your preparation. Every failure carries data. Something didn't work, and that outcome is giving you clues. Maybe your timing was off. Maybe your approach wasn't strong enough. Maybe your skills need improvement. This perspective transforms disappointment into curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why am I so bad at this?" you begin to ask, "What exactly went wrong, and how can I improve it?" That single change in questioning opens the door to growth because it directs your mind toward learning instead of self-destruction. Seeing failure as feedback also builds resilience. When people view failure as final, they often quit after the first or second setback. They emotionally collapse, lose confidence, and convince themselves they're not cut out for success. But when failure becomes a form of feedback, you expect it as part of the journey. You understand that refinement takes repetition, and that mastery is built through correction. Each setback becomes a training session instead of a trauma. Over time, this mindset makes you harder to break because you're no longer surprised by difficulty. This approach removes the fear of starting. Many people stay stuck not because they can't succeed, but because they're afraid to try. They imagine the pain of failure and decide it's safer to do nothing. But when failure becomes feedback, starting no longer feels like jumping off a cliff. It feels like running experiments. You begin to view life as a testing ground where attempts are necessary, not shameful. This gives you momentum because action feels safer than inaction. Failure as feedback also shifts your identity. Instead of labeling yourself as a failure, you label the attempt as incomplete. This difference is huge. When you turn failure into an identity, it infects your confidence, your language, and your behavior. You say things like, "I'm not good at this," or "I always mess up." But when failure is feedback, you separate who you are from what happened. You start saying, "That didn't work," rather than "I don't work." That mental distance protects your self-esteem while still allowing you to improve. Another important effect of this mindset is that it teaches patience. Progress rarely comes in a straight line. There are wrong turns, slow periods, and invisible growth happening beneath the surface. If you interpret these moments as proof that you should stop, you miss the process entirely. But when you treat them as feedback, you understand that learning requires iteration. You stop rushing mastery and start respecting the process. This patience makes you more disciplined because you're no longer chasing quick wins. You're building long-term skill. This mindset also increases accountability without adding shame. You can admit mistakes freely when you don't feel attacked by them. You don't have to hide errors, pretend perfection, or defend your ego. You simply say, "That was a mistake. What can I learn from it?" This kind of honesty is rare and powerful. It makes you more trustworthy, more grounded, and more open to growth. People who can calmly analyze their failures often become leaders because they bring clarity instead of drama. Over time, treating failure as feedback trains your brain to seek improvement naturally. Your mind becomes tuned to patterns, corrections, and refinement. You become more analytical about your actions and more intentional about your choices. You stop repeating the same mistakes because you actually extract lessons instead of berating the experience. Each failure becomes a stepping stone instead of a stopping point. Eventually, failure stops feeling like something to avoid and starts feeling like part of your education. Each setback sharpens your judgment, strengthens your character, and deepens your wisdom. You don't fall apart when things go wrong. You examine them, adjust them, and move forward with more intelligence and more strength. This quiet, internal upgrade is what separates people who plateau from people who continuously evolve. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you want to become because it operates when motivation fades, when excitement disappears, and when comfort starts calling you back to old habits. Motivation is emotional and emotions are inconsistent. One day you feel inspired, and the next day you feel tired, distracted, or discouraged. Discipline does not rely on how you feel, it relies on what you decided. That is why it is so powerful. It turns intention into action and dreams into routines. When you look at any transformation, whether physical, mental, financial, or spiritual, discipline is always present. People often admire the visible results, but they rarely see the quiet structure behind them. That structure is built through repeated, sometimes boring, sometimes uncomfortable actions. Discipline is waking up earlier than you want to. It is choosing focus over distraction. It is showing up on days when no one is applauding. This consistency is what builds the bridge from your current state to your desired self. Discipline works because it reduces the gap between decision and execution. Many people know what they should do. They know they should eat better, study more, practice their skill, and manage their time wisely. The difference between those who grow and those who stay stuck is not knowledge, but follow-through. Discipline is the muscle that performs the follow-through. It trains you to act even when your mind offers excuses. Each time you override an excuse, you strengthen this internal muscle. This bridge-building process is gradual and cumulative. One disciplined action might not seem powerful on its own, but repeated daily, it becomes life-changing. 10 minutes of reading each day builds knowledge. A short workout, repeated consistently, builds strength. Saving small amounts of money regularly builds wealth. Discipline compounds like interest. It doesn't create instant change, it creates inevitable change. When discipline becomes part of your identity, progress becomes predictable. Another important aspect of discipline is that it builds self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, even a small one, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. Most people struggle not because they lack ability, but because they don't trust themselves to follow through. Broken promises to self weaken confidence. Discipline repairs that damage. When you commit to a standard and consistently meet it, your self-respect grows. You begin to see yourself as someone who does what they say, and that identity is extremely powerful. Discipline also structures your environment internally. You don't always need perfect external conditions when your internal structure is strong. You can be tired and still act. You can be bored and still focus. You can be afraid and still step forward. This doesn't mean you don't feel resistance. It means you're no longer controlled by it. Discipline gives you that control. It puts you in the driver's seat instead of letting your impulses steer your life. The bridge metaphor is important because discipline connects the present to the future. On one side is who you are today with your habits, your comfort zone, and your limitations. On the other side is who you want to become with your potential, your goals, and your higher standards. Discipline is the structure that allows you to cross from one side to the other safely and consistently. Without it, the distance feels overwhelming. With it, the path becomes clear step by step. Discipline also creates freedom, which sounds like a contradiction but is deeply true. When you lack discipline, you are controlled by urges, moods, distractions, and laziness. You feel free in the moment, but trapped in the long run. With discipline, you restrict yourself in small ways daily, but you gain massive freedom over time. You gain freedom from regret, freedom from chaos, freedom from dependence. This is why disciplined people often look calm and in control. They are not fighting themselves every day. As you practice discipline, your tolerance for discomfort increases. You stop running from hard things. You stop avoiding effort. You begin to understand that discomfort is the price of growth, and discipline is how you pay that price consistently. Over time, what once felt hard becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes routine. Through discipline, you slowly reshape your identity. You move from someone who hopes to someone who acts, from someone who dreams to someone who builds, from someone who reacts to someone who leads their own life based on principle rather than impulse. That is why discipline is not just a tool for success, but a bridge for personal evolution, carrying you steadily from where you stand to where you are capable of standing. Small daily habits create massive long-term transformation because they work quietly, consistently, and beneath the surface before they ever show visible results. Most people overestimate what they can change in a week and underestimate what they can change in a year. Big dramatic efforts feel exciting, but they are hard to sustain. Small habits, on the other hand, are realistic. They fit into daily life without overwhelming you. And because of that, they are more likely to be repeated. Repetition is the real engine of transformation. Every habit is like a tiny vote for the kind of person you are becoming. One healthy meal does not make you fit, and one workout does not make you strong, but a pattern of small good choices builds a new identity over time. Your brain is wired to adapt to repeated behavior. When you repeat a small action daily, your mind begins to accept it as part of who you are rather than something you're trying to force. This is how real, lasting change takes root. The power of small habits comes from their compound effect. Just like money grows through compound interest, behavior grows through repeated consistency. Improving just 1% every day seems insignificant in the short term, but over months and years it creates enormous growth. A person who reads just 10 pages a day will finish dozens of books in a year. Someone who practices a skill for 20 minutes daily will outperform someone who trains intensely only once in a while. This slow, steady approach builds momentum that becomes hard to stop. Small habits also reduce resistance. The mind naturally avoids big challenges because they feel heavy and stressful. Saying you will completely change your life in 1 month creates psychological pressure and fear of failure. But committing to tiny actions feels safe and manageable. It's easier to promise yourself 5 minutes of focus than 2 hours. And once you start, it becomes much easier to continue. The hardest part is often just beginning, and small habits make the beginning feel effortless. Another hidden strength of small daily habits is that they create structure. Structure reduces chaos. When certain positive actions become automatic, you don't have to rely on willpower to perform them. They happen almost on their own. This frees mental energy for bigger decisions. You no longer debate whether to do the small things, you just do them. Over time, your daily routine becomes a system that quietly supports your goals without constant stress or emotional struggle. Small habits also change the way you see yourself. When you consistently act in alignment with your goals, even in small ways, your internal dialogue shifts. You stop seeing yourself as someone who trees and start seeing yourself as someone who does. This identity shift is critical. A person who sees themselves as disciplined, focused, or healthy will naturally behave in ways that match that identity. The behavior reinforces the belief, and the belief reinforces the behavior, creating a powerful loop of growth. The beauty of small habits is that they make progress feel normal rather than exceptional. You are not waiting for rare bursts of motivation or perfect conditions. You are simply doing what you do every day. This normalizes growth. It becomes part of your lifestyle instead of a temporary challenge. And when growth feels normal, it becomes permanent. You stop relapsing into old patterns because the new ones feel natural. Small habits also build emotional stability. Big changes often bring emotional highs and lows. You feel excited at the beginning and discouraged when the excitement fades. Small habits create steadiness instead. You may not feel dramatic highs, but you also avoid dramatic crashes. This balanced progress makes it easier to stay committed because you are not riding emotional waves. You are walking a steady, reliable path. Over time, the results of small habits begin to show. They appear as confidence, competence, improved health, stronger relationships, better focus, and deeper self-respect. These results seem sudden to outsiders, but they are built invisibly through tiny, repeated actions. People often call it luck or talent, but it is simply the visible outcome of invisible consistency. What makes this approach truly powerful is that it shifts your focus from outcomes to process. Instead of obsessing over distant goals, you concentrate on what you can do today. And when today is handled well, tomorrow naturally becomes better. That is how small daily habits quietly reshape your life from the inside out, turning ordinary days into the foundation for extraordinary long-term change. Your environment has a powerful influence on your behavior because humans are highly adaptive. The people you spend time with, the information you consume, and the physical spaces you occupy shape your thoughts, your mood, and your actions more than you might realize. If you are surrounded by negativity, laziness, or chaos, it becomes harder to maintain focus, discipline, and optimism. The environment can either pull you forward or slowly drag you backward without you even noticing. This is why environment matters, but it is not the final authority over who you become. Decisions determine destiny because influence is not the same as control. You might not choose your starting point, your upbringing, or the opportunities placed in front of you, but you do choose how you respond to them. That choice repeated over time becomes your direction. Your environment may hand you the script, but you decide whether to follow it or rewrite it. This distinction is where real personal power begins to emerge. When people rely too heavily on environment, they develop a passive mindset. They believe that if circumstances change, they can change. If people were nicer, they'd be happier. If the job was better, they'd work harder. If money was easier to earn, they'd be more disciplined. This kind of thinking makes growth conditional. It postpones progress until everything feels favorable. The problem is that favorable conditions are rare and temporary. Waiting for the perfect environment often means waiting forever. Strong decisions, on the other hand, create internal stability. When you decide what you stand for, what you will tolerate, and what you will pursue, the environment loses its grip over your identity. You might feel pressure, temptation, or resistance, but you are no longer easily swayed. Your values become stronger than your surroundings. You stop living as a product of your environment and start living as a creator of your experience within that environment. This does not mean environment should be ignored. It should be managed, but not feared. You can't always change your city, your workplace, or your family instantly, but you can choose your reactions, your habits, and your boundaries. You can choose what voices you listen to. You can choose what content you consume. You can choose who you allow to influence your mindset. These are decisions within your control, and they make a significant difference even when the external conditions remain the same. Decisions also shape how you grow under pressure. A difficult environment can make you bitter or make you better. It can make you defensive or make you disciplined. The difference lies in the decisions you make in those moments. You can decide to complain, or you can decide to adapt. You can decide to give up, or you can decide to improve. Pressure does not create character. It reveals and refines it through the choices you make. When you start understanding that decisions shape destiny, you stop wasting energy blaming circumstances. You stop feeling powerless. You begin to see that every small decision is a step toward a future version of yourself. What you do with your time, what you do with your energy, what you do when no one is watching. These are not small things. They are building blocks of your life's direction. Destiny is not formed in dramatic moments. It is formed in repeated, quiet decisions. This mindset builds resilience because it removes dependence on external validation. You are no longer waiting for permission, approval, or ideal support. You move based on principle, not popularity. Even if your environment is chaotic, discouraging, or unstable, you remain steady because your decisions come from clarity, not chaos. This inner steadiness allows you to grow in places where others stagnate. It also builds leadership qualities within you. Leaders are not people with perfect environments. They are people who make strong decisions despite imperfect environments. They don't wait for permission from circumstances. They create momentum through choice. When you practice this way of thinking, you naturally develop confidence and authority, not because you control everything around you, but because you control yourself within it. Over time, consistent decisions begin to reshape your environment as well. You attract different people. You create better opportunities. You move toward healthier situations. But this happens as a byproduct, not a prerequisite. The core truth remains that while environment may push you in certain directions, it is always your decisions that ultimately decide who you become and where your life moves. Consistency is more powerful than motivation because motivation is a feeling, and feelings are naturally unstable. One day you feel energized, driven, and inspired, and the next day you feel tired, distracted, or discouraged. If your progress depends on how you feel, then your results will always be unpredictable. Consistency, however, is not emotional. It is behavioral. It is the quiet decision to keep showing up regardless of mood, weather, or circumstance. Motivation often creates strong beginnings, but weak follow-through. It gives you the rush of starting something new, but rarely provides the structure needed to sustain it. Many people begin projects, routines, and goals with excitement, only to abandon them once the initial spark fades. Consistency does the opposite. It rarely feels exciting, but it builds momentum. It turns actions into habits and habits into identity. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic simply because it has been repeated enough times. The real magic of consistency lies in its ability to compound. Each small action builds on the one before it. Missing a single day doesn't destroy progress, but repeated actions accelerate it. When you show up daily, even imperfectly, you maintain continuity. Your mind stays connected to the goal. Your muscles, skills, and mindset stay active. This uninterrupted chain of effort creates a rhythm that becomes harder to break than to maintain. Consistency also creates trust with yourself. When you stop relying on bursts of motivation and start relying on disciplined repetition, you stop making excuses. You begin to see yourself as dependable. Self-trust is the foundation of confidence. When you know you can rely on yourself to keep going, your fear of failure decreases because you believe you'll persist long enough to learn. That belief changes everything, including how boldly you approach challenges. Another reason consistency matters more than motivation is that it removes decision fatigue. When you act only when motivated, you constantly debate whether to take action. You waste mental energy negotiating with yourself. Consistency makes your behavior predictable. You don't ask whether to do the work. You simply do it because that's what you do every day. This simplicity creates mental clarity and reduces stress, making it easier to focus on improving quality rather than fighting resistance. Consistency also builds resilience. It teaches you to operate even when conditions aren't ideal. You learn how to perform when you're tired, stressed, bored, or emotionally flat. This ability to keep moving under imperfect conditions is what separates professionals from amateurs in every field. Talent might give you a head start, but consistency carries you through difficult phases. It creates depth of character by teaching you to value progress over comfort. Motivation is heavily influenced by external factors such as praise, success, approval, and visible results. When those things disappear, motivation often evaporates. Consistency is internally driven. It comes from commitment, routine, and standards rather than external rewards. This makes it more reliable because it does not depend on validation. You continue the process not because you are applauded, but because you have decided that this is who you are. Consistent effort also shifts your relationship with time. Instead of rushing for quick results, you become patient. You understand that progress is a byproduct of persistence. This patience reduces anxiety and pressure. You stop trying to force outcomes and start trusting the process. When you trust the process, you stop quitting during the boring, slow, or silent phases of growth. Those silent phases are often where the most important development happens. Over time, consistency reshapes your identity. You stop calling yourself someone who tries. You become someone who shows up. That identity naturally produces results. The external wins are simply reflections of the internal stability you've built. This is why consistent people often seem calm and grounded. They are not at war with themselves. They act in alignment with their standards regardless of how they feel. Consistency does not mean perfection. It means returning to the path quickly whenever you step off it. It means valuing long-term integrity over short-term comfort. Each day of continued effort strengthens the structure you are building within yourself. That structure becomes your real advantage in life. While motivation may sparkle and fade, consistency burns steadily, quietly powering progress through ordinary days and unseen effort, shaping outcomes that last far beyond temporary bursts of enthusiasm. Rebuilding yourself is not a one-day decision, not a single breakthrough, and not a moment of loud victory. It is a quiet, daily commitment to become better than you were yesterday. It is choosing discipline over distraction, growth over comfort, and responsibility over excuses. No matter where you are starting from, you have the power to rise, refine, and rebuild your life from the inside out. You are not here by accident, and your potential is not a rumor. It is real, it is waiting, and it belongs to those who are brave enough to claim it through consistent action. Remember, your future is not built by what you wish for, but by what you repeatedly work for. To everyone listening, I wish you strength, clarity, and unshakable belief in your journey. May you have the courage to rebuild, the discipline to persist, and the confidence to rise. Good luck on your path to becoming the best version of yourself, and thank you for your time and attention.